And when you asked this yesterday on the phone, I immediately thought of cities in Europe. And then you said, no, it has to be in Minnesota. In Europe, they've done less. After World War II, Europe, many of the cities were completely destroyed. And they made a conscious decision because they could have gone easily with the suburban development pattern. I mean, they had basically a blank slate to start to work from. And they intentionally reconstructed their places the way that they had historically been. If you go to the great cities of Europe, you will see very strong, resilient communities in their form and their structure. In Minnesota, we have done a lot to basically destroy that and rip that apart. And I struggle because I don't think any community in Minnesota really meets what our strong towns criteria would be. But there are parts of them that do. And I would say my favorite right now is Northfield, Minnesota. If you've ever been to Northfield, they have a fantastic, fantastic downtown. And for the most part, around their town, the rural areas have not been engineered to this pathetic highway standard. They actually have some small country roads. They do have a little bit of the asteroid belt of bad suburban development, but it's not omnipresent in the city. So Northfield would be my personal favorite.
So I'm going to give an example of the small town that is closest to our farm. It's Clinton, Minnesota, population 400. It is classified by the USDA as being a rural food desert. And one of the things that is remarkable about that community is it has a grocery store on Main Street that's pretty robust. The rule of thumb for rural groceries is that unless you have probably around 1,800 people, you can't support a grocery. So think about a town of 400 supporting a grocery store that has 2 distributions a week. In addition, since the school district is 50 miles wide, there was a project started by the food shelf in the county, planting fruit trees at the home of every child in K through 6. And so far they've planted apple trees, plum trees, cherries, sweet cherries, and I think in 2013 will be contender peach. So that'll be about 800 fruit trees for those 200 children over the course of 4 years so that they actually have access to that food right where they live. And the other thing that is unique about this community of 400 and a few other people, first off, they've lost 50% of their population over the last 30 years. So this was once a much more thriving place with many more people. But despite that, it's striking how much they care for the vulnerable people in the community, which I should say my background is I also have something of an engineering, a water resources degree, and a soil science degree, so I come at it from the science part. But what I'm going to say is important about a resilient community is also how the people care for each other. So in this small town, they have 2 facilities to care for their vulnerable adults, in addition to a care center, which is no longer a certified nursing home, but is kept open with community involvement and fundraising. And in this week's newspaper, they have a weekly newspaper, there were 3 families who are having fundraisers because they've had health issues and can't support themselves. And in addition, I'll just give this small story, is that there's no police in this town because they had to let go of the police. And so there were some incidents of spousal abuse. And some of the men in the community just got together. This is kind of uncomfortable to talk about, but they actually went to that husband and said, this isn't cool. We don't want to see your wife coming to work with black eyes anymore. So, I mean, I think there's something about having a community like that with people who care for each other, in addition to the little pieces of, other infrastructure that, in my view, is what is part of resilience.
I guess my best example, and I will definitely say it's a work in progress, is here in Pine River. And maybe that's a little utopian and idyllic that's what I'm hoping for because I live here. But certainly I feel like the things that have sort of coalesced and happened in the last couple of years, maybe last 5, 7, certainly till now and hopefully in the future, I think definitely the community awareness around resilience and sustainability is growing, and the interest level, which I think is going to continue to push Pine River towards resilience.
I think one of the most resilient communities I've ever seen is Perham, Minnesota, for a host of reasons, but they have a unique capacity for pulling their city government, their businesses, the surrounding ag, to an incredibly highly collaborative effort on meeting a variety of needs. And they, time and again, when they've had business troubles, they seem as a community to be able to pull together and resiliently keep things going.
I think that you hit the nail on the head with Perham in terms of, I think, their social capacity to work together. And I think that they are a unique place. New York Mills has this same kind of flavor to it. I don't know if there's anybody here from New York Mills, but New York Mills has a group of business people and community leaders that get together weekly. And they get together just for coffee and just to talk. And it's really, I think, humanized their dialogue a lot more than what you see in other places. If you look at Perham, though, we did a study for Perham last year where we looked at basically their financial resiliency. And I'm going to get back to that because we can all get along and have good social working, but if we're going bankrupt, you know, there's both aspects to it here. And Perham right now today spends 45% of their budget on debt service. And that debt service is going to pay for their roads. Now, if you've ever been to Perham, their city streets are Champs-Élysées width. I mean, they're literally like 80 feet wide. And they do it because that's the Perham, you know, that's the Perham approach. But literally, in order to keep that going, they've had to successively borrow more and more and more money. And we actually just did a trajectory for them and showed, look, in 5 years, your entire budget's going to go to debt service to build these wide, obnoxious roads. And so, you know, I think that to me, the admirable thing about Perham is that we had a really intelligent discussion. And even though it was going to the heart of culturally something that they valued, they looked at these wide roads as being part of their community character, they had enough of an inner dialogue to talk that through and actually change their approach. So I would second the resiliency of Perham, but more for their ability to, I think, kind of adapt than anything else.
Yes. So I'll say social cohesion is part of it. If you look at a map of the United States, some of the work of Putman, who did Bowling Alone, shows that this area, this like Minnesota, North, South Dakota, is the least pugnacious of the entire nation. And how he gauged that was, when you're asked, if you're in a bar fight, are you going to win? People elsewhere in the country would say, damn sure. And in Minnesota, they're like, oh, bar fight, you know. So I think that we have some cultural assets that we should keep in mind that I think help with social cohesion. And I'll say that's what I see in this small town.
One of the things that makes me, I guess, feel like a community is resilient or sustainable or whatever is seeing people. And certainly when there isn't a ton of car traffic, you see people, but mostly it's the people that feel comfortable letting their kids play outside, letting them walk to school. It's the people that do their shopping by walking, or it's just seeing people down the main street. So, you know, easily that's a social, you know, it ties into capacity and cohesion easily just with seeing people. They're interacting then, they're getting to know one another, they're building those relationships, you know, whether it's that they feel more comfortable with their neighbor, the store owner, whatever. It's relationships, certainly. And I think that a big deal, and I know this ties into a little bit of what Chuck spoke about before, is the main street. It's not having everything that's super car ready, that's built just for cars. And that, I think a thriving main street certainly ties into the resilience of a community. Furthermore, I think active organizations, you know, whether they're kind of informal and it's the coffee groups, whether it's, you know, the Lions, the Rotary, the whatever, that you see a presence and you know that they're a resource for you.